And the moment we begin to feel safe inside our own bodies, something extraordinary starts to change in the chemistry of our cells. For years, I believed aging was a one-way process written permanently into the body, like a countdown we could never interrupt. But the deeper I explored the connection between consciousness and biology, the more I realized the human body is responding to signals far beyond nutrition, exercise, or genetics alone. Every thought we repeat, every emotion we sustain, and every belief we accept becomes part of a biological instruction system shaping the way our cells behave each day. What fascinates me most is that the body does not always distinguish between an external experience and an internally generated emotional state. When we live in chronic fear, resentment, pressure, or emotional exhaustion, the nervous system interprets those patterns as survival signals. Stress hormones remain elevated, inflammation increases quietly beneath the surface, recovery slows, the body shifts its energy away from regeneration and toward protection. Over time, this creates the conditions we associate with aging. But when we interrupt those patterns consciously, the biology begins to change in measurable ways. Modern research into neuroplasticity, epigenetics, and cellular communication continues revealing something ancient traditions seem to understand intuitively. Human beings are not passive victims of biology. We are participants within it. Our inner world influences the signals reaching every organ, gland, and cell in the body. This means the emotional environment we create internally may be just as important as the physical environment surrounding us. I began noticing this principle most clearly in people who carried a strong sense of purpose. Their energy felt different, their eyes appeared more awake, their bodies moved with vitality even later in life. And often they were not following extreme routines. What they shared was emotional coherence. Their thoughts, feelings, and actions were aligned instead of internally divided. That alignment matters more than most people realize. When the heart and brain enter a state of coherence, the body produces a different biochemical response. Breathing becomes more rhythmic, stress signals decrease, repair mechanisms become more active. Some studies suggest this state can influence immune strength, hormonal balance, and even the expression of genes related to inflammation and aging. In other words, the body responds differently when we feel emotionally connected, grounded, and internally stable. I think many people underestimate how deeply unresolved emotional patterns accelerate physical exhaustion. The body remembers every experience we refuse to process. Suppressed anger, constant anxiety, emotional numbness, and hopelessness all create tension within the nervous system. Eventually, that tension becomes the background frequency of daily life. We normalize exhaustion without realizing our biology is adapting to emotional stress it was never designed to carry continuously. And this is where the anti-aging code begins to activate. Not through denial of aging, but through restoring communication between the mind and the body. One of the most powerful shifts I ever witnessed came from people who learned how to feel elevated emotions consistently. Gratitude, compassion, appreciation, love, inspiration, and genuine connection are not merely psychological experiences. They create measurable physiological changes. The heart rhythm changes, brainwave patterns shift, hormonal chemistry adjusts, muscles relax, blood vessels respond differently, the immune system becomes more efficient. The body listens to emotional language constantly. This is why two individuals living similar lifestyles can age in dramatically different ways. One carries years of emotional burden internally, while the other learns how to release it. One lives in anticipation of danger, while the other cultivates meaning and emotional resilience. Biology reflects those differences over time. Ancient cultures often described the body as an energy system before modern science had instruments capable of studying subtle electrical communication inside the human organism. Today we know the heart generates an electromagnetic field. The brain communicates electrically. Cells exchange information continuously. The body is not a collection of disconnected parts. It is an intelligent network responding to signals moment by moment. And perhaps the most important signal of all is the meaning we attach to our lives. When people lose meaning, the body frequently declines faster. Motivation weakens, energy drops, healing slows. But when purpose returns, vitality often follows with surprising speed. I have seen people transform physically after rediscovering creativity, connection, curiosity, or service. Something inside them reawakens and the body responds as if it has been given permission to regenerate again. That tells me aging is not merely physical. It is informational. It is emotional. It is energetic. And once we understand that, we begin to see why certain states of consciousness appear to preserve vitality while others gradually diminish it. Because every moment the body is listening to the story we continue telling ourselves about who we are, what is possible, and whether life still feels worth fully living. I have come to believe that one of the greatest misunderstandings about human aging is the assumption that time alone is responsible for decline. Time matters, of course, but the interpretation of our experiences may matter just as much. A person who wakes each day emotionally defeated sends a completely different signal into the nervous system than someone who wakes with curiosity, gratitude, and inner direction. The cells respond accordingly. Even language affects the body. When we constantly repeat phrases associated with weakness, exhaustion, hopelessness, or limitation, the subconscious mind absorbs those patterns as instructions. Over months and years, identity becomes biology. But when we consciously change the emotional meaning attached to our lives, the body often begins adapting to that new signal with remarkable sensitivity. This does not happen overnight. The body trusts repetition more than intensity. Small daily states repeated consistently become biological programs. And when we finally understand how to create internal coherence intentionally, we begin unlocking a level of human potential that most people have never been taught to recognize, because beneath the surface of every emotion, thought, and expectation, the body is continuously translating consciousness into physical reality in ways we are only beginning to understand through modern science. What once sounded mystical is now becoming measurable. Researchers studying cellular aging have observed that emotional stress can influence the length and stability of telomeres, the protective caps associated with cellular longevity. At the same time, practices connected to emotional regulation, meditation, focused breathing, and positive mental states appear capable of supporting healthier biological function over time. This suggests something profound. The body is not simply aging because years pass. It is responding to the quality of signals it receives repeatedly. And most people are unknowingly sending signals of survival every single day. I see it constantly. We rush through life in a state of internal pressure. We wake already anticipating problems. We replay painful memories long after the events have ended. We carry emotional tension into conversations, work, relationships, and even into sleep. The nervous system rarely receives a message that it is safe enough to repair. Instead, the body becomes chemically addicted to stress itself. That addiction changes everything. When the brain becomes conditioned to survival emotions, the familiar begins to feel normal, even when it is harmful. Some people no longer know how to feel peace without discomfort. Silence feels unfamiliar. Stillness feels unsafe. The body keeps searching for the next conflict because stress has become part of identity. Over time, this constant internal alarm accelerates fatigue throughout the entire system. But the moment we interrupt that cycle intentionally, the body notices immediately. I remember speaking with individuals who transformed their health not through extreme interventions, but through emotional transformation. They changed the way they interpreted life. They learned how to regulate fear instead of feeding it. They practiced gratitude until it became natural rather than forced. They created moments of deep presence each day where the body could finally shift out of defense mode. Slowly, their energy returned, their sleep improved, their minds became clearer. Even their physical appearance began changing in subtle but undeniable ways. This is the hidden power of emotional coherence. The human body thrives when it feels connected rather than fragmented. And fragmentation happens whenever our thoughts move in one direction while our emotions move in another. We may say we want peace while internally rehearsing anxiety. We may desire healing while emotionally identifying with suffering. The body receives mixed instructions, and confusion becomes chemistry. Coherence begins when the mind and heart communicate the same message. That message does not need to be perfect. It simply needs to be consistent. One of the simplest ways to activate this state is through conscious attention. Wherever attention goes, energy follows. When we continuously focus on fear, decline, resentment, and limitation, the nervous system organizes around those emotional patterns. But when attention shifts toward possibility, healing, meaning, creativity, and connection, new neural pathways begin forming. Biology adapts to the emotional environment we cultivate repeatedly. This is why visualization practices can be so powerful when combined with genuine emotion. The body responds not only to what we physically experience, but also to what we emotionally rehearse internally. Athletes have used this principle for decades. Musicians use it. High performers use it. The brain activates many of the same neural networks during vivid mental rehearsal as it does during real experience. When emotion is added to the picture, the signal becomes even stronger. In many ways, the body is always listening to the future we expect. If we expect decline, helplessness, and exhaustion, the nervous system begins preparing for those outcomes. But if we emotionally embody vitality, resilience, and renewal before external evidence appears, the body often begins shifting toward that reality gradually from the inside out. This does not mean pretending difficulties do not exist. Real transformation is not denial. It is learning how to remain internally balanced while moving through life's uncertainties. The strongest nervous systems are not those that never experience stress. They are the ones capable of returning to balance efficiently after stress occurs. And that ability may be one of the greatest anti-aging mechanisms available to us. Because recovery is where regeneration happens. During deep states of rest, repair processes increase, hormonal balance improves, inflammation decreases, memory consolidates, cells regenerate more efficiently. Yet many people rarely enter true restorative states because their minds remain trapped in continuous mental activity. Even while resting physically, they remain emotionally overstimulated internally. I believe this is one reason practices involving breath, meditation, reflection, and emotional awareness have existed across cultures for thousands of years. These practices interrupt the stress response. They create moments where the body can remember what balance feels like again. And once the body experiences that state repeatedly, it becomes easier to access naturally. The heart plays a remarkable role in this process as well. Studies exploring heart coherence suggest the emotional state of the heart influences communication throughout the body. When emotions such as appreciation or compassion are sustained sincerely, heart rhythms become more ordered and harmonious. That harmony appears to influence brain function, stress regulation, and overall physiological stability. In other words, elevated emotions are not weak, they are biologically intelligent. Most people have been taught to treat emotions as secondary to physical health, when in reality, emotions may be one of the deepest regulators of physical condition. Every emotional state carries chemistry. Every repeated feeling becomes part of the body's internal environment. Over decades, those emotional environments shape the way we age. And perhaps this explains why some individuals seem to radiate vitality regardless of chronological age. Their bodies are no longer operating primarily from fear, tension, and survival. Something inside them has become more coherent, more open, more alive. Their energy communicates it before words ever do. The remarkable part is that this potential exists within all of us, not as a fantasy, but as an untapped capacity hidden beneath the noise of modern life. And once a person begins understanding how consciousness, emotion, and biology interact together, they start realizing that aging may not simply be a process happening to us automatically, but a relationship we are participating in moment by moment through every thought we energize, every emotion we sustain, and every internal state we repeatedly choose to embody without even realizing it has been shaping our biology all along. In ways far deeper than most people have ever imagined, the body is constantly adapting, constantly listening, constantly translating our inner experience into physical expression. And the more I studied this connection, the more I realized that vitality is not only about preserving youth, it is about preserving aliveness. There is a difference. Many people remain physically functional while emotionally disconnected from themselves. Their routines continue, their responsibilities continue, yet internally something begins fading. Curiosity weakens, inspiration disappears. The emotional energy that once animated the body slowly contracts. Over time, the nervous system starts operating from predictability instead of possibility. And when life becomes emotionally repetitive, the biology often follows the same pattern. The human body was designed for growth, adaptation, and exploration. Every time we learn something new, experience wonder, create meaningful connection, or step beyond emotional limitation, the brain forms new pathways, chemical messengers shift, energy changes, The body responds to novelty with activation. This may explain why people who continue learning, creating, and evolving often appear younger than those who emotionally surrender to routine and resignation. In many ways, emotional stagnation accelerates aging more quietly than physical stress. I have seen individuals transform simply by rediscovering a sense of meaning. Some began painting again after decades. Others reconnected with nature, music, movement, or deep conversation. The moment genuine emotional engagement returned, their presence changed, their posture changed, their voices changed. It was as though dormant energy inside the body had been reactivated. This is important because the body responds not only to what we do, but to how deeply alive we feel while doing it. A person can follow every external health practice perfectly and still remain internally exhausted if their emotional state is disconnected from joy, purpose, or connection. Meanwhile, someone else may carry immense vitality because their inner world continually generates emotional energy that supports the body rather than draining it. That emotional energy matters profoundly. Modern science now recognizes that the brain and immune system communicate continuously. Hormones influence mood, but mood also influences hormones. Thoughts affect chemistry, and chemistry affects thoughts. The body is an integrated intelligence rather than isolated systems functioning independently. Once we understand this, we begin seeing health differently. We stop viewing the mind and body as separate experiences. They are reflections of each other. This is why unresolved emotional pain often manifests physically over time. The body stores tension where emotion remains unprocessed. Some people carry it in the chest, others in the stomach, shoulders, jaw, or nervous system itself. Eventually, the body begins speaking the language the conscious mind has ignored. Fatigue, inflammation, insomnia, digestive imbalance, and chronic stress become signals rather than random failures. And yet, the opposite is also true. When emotional healing begins, the body frequently responds with extraordinary intelligence. Breathing deepens naturally, sleep improves, energy returns, inflammation decreases, clarity increases. This does not happen because of magic. It happens because the body is finally receiving different instructions. One of the most overlooked anti-aging forces may simply be emotional safety. When the body feels safe, repair mechanisms activate more effectively. Creativity expands, digestion improves, the immune system functions with greater balance. The nervous system stops wasting energy preparing for threats that no longer exist. Safety allows the organism to redirect energy toward regeneration rather than protection. But emotional safety is something many people never truly experience internally. Even in peaceful environments, the mind continues replaying fear-based patterns learned years earlier. Old emotional memories become present tense reactions. The body relives stress chemically even when danger is absent physically. This is why awareness becomes transformative. The moment we observe our internal patterns consciously, we interrupt automatic programming. We begin noticing which thoughts create contraction and which create expansion. We recognize how certain emotions drain the body while others restore it. Slowly, we become more intentional about the states we cultivate daily. And this is where real biological change begins. Not from forcing the body, but from changing the information influencing it. I often think about how rarely people are taught to care for their emotional energy with the same seriousness they give physical appearance. Yet emotional energy may shape aging more profoundly than almost anything else. Resentment ages the face. Chronic fear weakens vitality. Hopelessness drains movement from the body. But gratitude, inspiration, curiosity, connection, and love create an entirely different physiological environment. You can often feel this difference immediately around certain people. Some individuals enter a room carrying tension that affects everyone nearby. Others radiate calmness that changes the emotional atmosphere without speaking. The human nervous system is constantly communicating beyond words. We influence each other biologically through emotion, tone, energy, and presence. That realization changes the way we see relationships as well. The people surrounding us can either reinforce survival patterns or support emotional coherence. Conversations filled with negativity, fear, and conflict continuously activate stress responses. Meanwhile, relationships grounded in trust, understanding, encouragement, and authenticity create emotional environments where the body can thrive. This may explain why loneliness impacts health so deeply. Human beings are not designed for emotional isolation. Connection regulates the nervous system. Feeling understood creates stability inside the body. Genuine human presence reduces stress chemistry in measurable ways. And perhaps that is part of the anti-aging code too. Not merely what we consume physically, but what we experience emotionally through connection, meaning, and belonging. Because beneath all the scientific language, the body appears to respond most powerfully to states that increase coherence. Every time we move from fear into trust, from stress into presence, from emotional fragmentation into alignment, the organism reorganizes itself toward balance. The extraordinary part is that this process remains available at any age. The body never stops listening completely. It continues responding to new emotional signals for as long as life remains within it, which means transformation is not reserved only for the young. Human biology carries an incredible capacity for adaptation even later in life when the right internal conditions are created consistently. And once people truly understand that their thoughts, emotions, relationships, memories, expectations, and sense of identity are all participating in the aging process together, they begin realizing that activating the body's deepest regenerative potential may depend less on fighting time itself and more on learning how to create an internal state where life can continue expressing itself fully, coherently, and consciously from within in a way that nourishes every system of the body simultaneously. Because when coherence becomes our natural state, energy is no longer consumed by constant internal conflict. The body can finally direct its resources toward restoration, creativity, and renewal instead of survival alone. I believe this is why some individuals seem to become more vibrant with age rather than less alive. Their bodies may change physically, but their presence deepens, their emotional energy becomes steadier, their minds become clearer. Their nervous systems stop reacting impulsively to every external event. There is a calm strength inside them that appears to slow the exhausting effects of chronic stress. That calmness is not passive. It is a trained biological state. Most people spend years unknowingly conditioning themselves into emotional chaos, constant stimulation, endless comparison, unresolved tension, and nonstop mental noise gradually teach the nervous system to remain overactivated. The body begins expecting stress as a normal condition. Over time, even small problems trigger exaggerated physiological reactions because the system has forgotten what true balance feels like. But the nervous system can be retrained, and this may be one of the most hopeful discoveries emerging from modern understanding of human consciousness. The brain remains adaptable throughout life. Emotional habits can change, neural pathways can reorganize, hormonal patterns can improve. The body is far more responsive than we were once taught to believe. I have noticed that transformation often begins with a single realization. People suddenly understand that their inner dialogue is not neutral. Every repeated thought becomes part of the body's chemistry. If someone spends years silently repeating fear-based beliefs, the body absorbs those signals continuously. Thoughts such as "I'm exhausted, I'm falling apart," or "life is draining me" may seem harmless at first, but repeated often enough, they become biological instructions. The subconscious mind listens carefully to repetition. This is why emotional awareness matters so deeply. The goal is not to suppress negative feelings or pretend difficulties do not exist. The goal is to stop unconsciously feeding the same destructive emotional states until they become identity. Awareness creates choice. Once we recognize a pattern, we can begin changing it intentionally. And intention itself is powerful. Studies exploring placebo responses have revealed something extraordinary about human biology. When people genuinely believe healing is possible, measurable physiological changes can occur even without active medication. Brain chemistry changes, pain decreases, recovery sometimes accelerates. This does not mean the experience is imaginary. It means belief has biological influence. Now imagine the implications of that. If belief can affect chemistry negatively through fear and hopelessness, then empowering emotional states may also influence the body positively through expectation, meaning, and internal alignment. The mind is not separate from physical reality. It participates in shaping it constantly. This is one reason I believe visualization combined with emotion can become transformative. When we vividly imagine ourselves healthy, energized, and emotionally free, while genuinely feeling those emotions internally, the body begins responding as though the future experience is already unfolding. Neural circuits activate, hormonal responses shift. The nervous system starts adapting to the emotional reality we are rehearsing. The body changes according to the emotional future we repeatedly embody. This principle becomes even more important as people age because many individuals unconsciously rehearse decline every day. They expect weakness, they anticipate limitation, they emotionally identify with deterioration before it fully occurs. The nervous system responds accordingly. But when someone begins expecting vitality instead, everything changes. I have seen older individuals learn new skills, transform their physical health, regain emotional energy, and completely redefine the way they experience aging, not because they denied reality, but because they stopped treating decline as inevitable. Their biology responded to possibility instead of resignation, and possibility creates energy. Energy itself may be one of the greatest indicators of internal coherence. When a person feels emotionally aligned, energy flows differently through the body. There is less resistance, thoughts become clearer, movement feels lighter, recovery improves, inspiration returns naturally rather than through force. Children demonstrate this state effortlessly. They become absorbed completely in curiosity, imagination, movement, and presence. Their energy flows freely because they are not yet burdened by years of emotional suppression and chronic psychological tension. Over time, many adults lose that openness. The nervous system becomes guarded, the body tightens, emotional expression contracts. In many ways, aging accelerates whenever emotional rigidity replaces emotional flexibility. Flexible systems adapt, rigid systems deteriorate under pressure. This applies physically, mentally, and emotionally. People who remain curious, emotionally expressive, adaptable, and connected often retain vitality longer, because their nervous systems continue engaging with life dynamically rather than defensively. And nature reflects this principle everywhere. Healthy ecosystems depend on movement, renewal, and balance. Stagnation leads to decay. Flow sustains life. The human body follows similar laws. Blood must circulate, breath must flow, emotions must move, thoughts must evolve. When energy becomes trapped through chronic stress, suppression, or emotional exhaustion, the organism gradually loses coherence. That is why practices involving movement, breath work, reflection, creativity, and emotional connection can feel so restorative. They restore flow to systems that have become restricted internally. They remind the body how to regulate itself naturally again. I think many people underestimate the healing power of simple presence as well. Modern life constantly pulls attention outward, fragmenting awareness across endless distractions. But when we become fully present, stress patterns often loosen immediately. Breathing slows, muscles relax, the mind quiets. The body exits future-based anxiety and reconnects with the present moment where regeneration actually occurs. Presence is biological medicine, not because it removes all challenges, but because it interrupts unnecessary suffering created by continuous mental projection. The body can only repair in the present. It cannot regenerate efficiently while trapped in endless anticipation of problems that have not happened. And once someone experiences the difference between living in survival mode and living in coherence, they begin understanding that the anti-aging code is not a single technique or secret discovery. It is a relationship between consciousness and biology that influences every cell continuously through thought, emotion, perception, attention, environment, and human connection in ways that modern science is only beginning to uncover as humanity slowly remembers how deeply the mind and body have always been communicating with each other beneath the surface of ordinary awareness. For far longer than we once believed possible, the evidence is appearing in neuroscience, epigenetics, psychophysiology, and even studies exploring the effects of meditation and emotional regulation on long-term health. Piece by piece, science is beginning to reveal that the human organism is not fixed. It is adaptive, responsive, and deeply influenced by consciousness itself. And yet, despite all of this emerging knowledge, many people still wake each day disconnected from their own bodies. They treat the body like a machine instead of an intelligent living system constantly communicating through sensation, emotion, energy, and intuition. They override exhaustion instead of listening to it. They suppress emotion instead of processing it. They consume stimulation constantly while starving themselves of stillness. Eventually, the body loses balance, not because it failed, but because its signals were ignored for too long. I think one of the greatest shifts a person can make is learning how to become present enough to hear what the body has been trying to communicate all along. The body speaks quietly at first. It communicates through tension, fatigue, restlessness, emotional heaviness, shallow breathing, and subtle discomfort. But when those signals continue unnoticed, the messages become louder. Chronic stress begins affecting sleep. Mental clarity weakens. Emotional resilience decreases. The immune system struggles to maintain balance. Over time, people begin feeling disconnected from the vitality they once carried naturally. But what fascinates me is how quickly the body can begin responding once a person changes their internal environment consistently. I have seen people who spent years trapped in stress suddenly experience dramatic improvements simply because they learned how to slow down internally. They began breathing differently, thinking differently, feeling differently. Their external lives may not have changed immediately, yet their biology started responding to the emotional shift taking place within them. This tells us something profound. The nervous system responds more to perception than circumstance alone. Two individuals can experience similar situations while producing completely different biological outcomes depending on how their minds interpret the experience. One becomes overwhelmed, fearful, and depleted. The other remains grounded, adaptive, and emotionally stable. Their bodies follow those different emotional instructions. That means resilience is not only psychological, it is biological. Every moment of emotional regulation strengthens the body's capacity to recover from stress more efficiently. Every moment of genuine gratitude alters chemistry. Every moment of deep connection creates physiological effects that ripple through the entire organism. The body is not waiting for perfect conditions before it begins healing. It responds to small, consistent shifts in awareness. And consistency matters more than intensity. Many people search endlessly for dramatic transformations while ignoring the power of daily emotional habits. But the body changes gradually through repetition. A single moment of peace helps temporarily. Repeated moments of peace begin reprogramming the nervous system. A single grateful thought changes chemistry briefly. Sustained gratitude changes the emotional baseline of the body over time. This is how identity becomes biology. Whatever emotional state we practice most frequently eventually becomes familiar to the nervous system. If stress is practiced daily, stress becomes normal. If calmness is practiced daily, calmness becomes accessible more naturally. The body adapts to whichever state we reinforce repeatedly. And this adaptation influences aging at every level. I often think about how many people carry emotional timelines inside themselves. They continue reliving old experiences as though the past is still happening now. The body does not fully distinguish between memory and reality. When emotion is strong enough, a painful memory replayed repeatedly can trigger the same chemical responses years after the event ended physically. Imagine the effect of that over decades. The nervous system becomes trapped in emotional history rather than present reality. Energy gets consumed by unresolved emotional loops. The body remains tense in preparation for dangers that no longer exist. Eventually, chronic stress becomes embedded into posture, breathing, facial expression, and physiology itself. But the moment we release those emotional patterns consciously, the body often responds with extraordinary relief. Forgiveness plays an important role here, though not in the simplistic way people often describe it. Forgiveness is not pretending harm never happened. It is releasing the ongoing biological burden of carrying emotional pain indefinitely. When resentment dominates the nervous system for years, the body pays a price for that internal tension continuously. Freedom begins the moment emotional energy is no longer trapped in the past. I believe this is why people who heal emotionally often appear physically lighter afterward. Their faces soften, their breathing changes, their movements become less rigid. The body reflects the emotional weight it carries internally. And the opposite is equally true. When people cultivate emotional states like appreciation, connection, wonder, curiosity, and compassion regularly, the body reflects those patterns too. There is more openness in the nervous system, more vitality and expression, more coherence throughout the organism. The body begins operating from expansion instead of contraction. Expansion may be one of the deepest biological signals of life itself. Everything healthy expands rhythmically. The lungs expand with breath. The heart expands and contracts continuously. Blood vessels adapt dynamically. Even emotional well-being often feels spacious rather than compressed. Chronic fear, however, creates contraction throughout the entire system. Muscles tighten, breathing shortens, attention narrows, energy becomes restricted. Over time, that contraction shapes the aging process profoundly. This is why elevated emotional states are not luxuries. They are regulators of biology. Joy changes chemistry. Meaning changes physiology. Connection changes neural activity. Inspiration affects hormonal balance. The emotional experiences we cultivate daily become part of the environment surrounding every cell in the body. And perhaps this is the deeper message modern science is slowly uncovering. Human beings are not merely biochemical machines reacting randomly to external events. We are conscious participants in our own biology. The mind influences the body influences the mind. Emotion acts as the bridge between them. Every thought carries chemistry. Every feeling carries information. Every repeated internal state becomes part of the body's adaptation process, which means the anti-aging code may not be hidden in something outside of us at all. It may already exist within the intelligence of the human organism itself, waiting to activate the moment we begin living in a way that restores coherence between the mind, heart, nervous system, and emotional reality, because once that alignment begins occurring consistently, the body starts responding as though it has finally remembered the conditions it was always designed to thrive within. Before modern life pulled us so deeply into disconnection, and perhaps that disconnection is the real source of exhaustion so many people feel today. Not simply physical fatigue, but separation from the natural rhythms that once kept the human organism balanced internally. When I observe people who radiate vitality well into later stages of life, I notice something consistent. They are emotionally engaged with life itself. Their minds remain open. Their curiosity remains active. They continue learning, adapting, connecting, and creating meaning. They are not trapped entirely in the past, nor are they consumed by fear of the future. Their attention remains connected to the present moment in a way that keeps their energy alive. That presence changes biology. Most people underestimate how much mental fragmentation drains the body. Constant worry divides attention. Endless comparison weakens emotional stability. Continuous stimulation overloads the nervous system. The body spends enormous amounts of energy processing emotional noise that never truly resolves into clarity. Over years, this becomes exhausting at the cellular level. But when attention becomes focused and intentional, energy reorganizes. I have experienced this personally during periods of deep stillness. The moment external noise quiets and the mind becomes fully present, the body begins responding almost immediately. Breathing slows naturally. Muscles release tension without force. Thoughts become clearer. The nervous system shifts away from defense and into restoration. This state is not imaginary, it is measurable. Research involving meditation, breath regulation, and mindfulness practices continues showing changes in stress hormones, inflammation markers, brain activity, immune response, and even gene expression. These findings suggest the body is constantly adapting to the quality of awareness we sustain repeatedly. In other words, consciousness leaves physical fingerprints. This realization changes the way we think about healing. Instead of viewing the body as something separate from thought and emotion, we begin recognizing that every internal experience becomes part of the body's environment. Emotional stress is not just in the mind, it becomes chemistry. Emotional coherence is not just a feeling, it becomes physiology. And this may explain why certain emotional states feel energizing while others feel physically draining. The body responds to emotional truth instantly. When we pretend to be okay while internally overwhelmed, the nervous system senses the conflict. When we suppress emotion continuously, tension accumulates beneath awareness. Eventually, the body expresses what words have not. Fatigue appears. Sleep becomes disrupted, energy decreases, emotional resilience weakens. But authenticity restores coherence. The moment we stop resisting our own emotional reality and begin processing it consciously, energy starts moving again. This does not mean remaining trapped in painful emotion. It means acknowledging what exists without allowing it to define identity permanently. Suppressed emotion stagnates the system. Processed emotion restores flow, and flow is essential to vitality. Nature demonstrates this principle everywhere. Rivers remain healthy through movement. Forests renew through cycles. Breath sustains life through constant exchange. The human organism also depends on movement emotionally, mentally, and biologically. When energy becomes frozen through chronic stress or emotional suppression, the body gradually loses adaptability. Adaptability may be one of the strongest indicators of youthfulness. Young organisms recover quickly because their systems remain flexible. They adapt efficiently to change. Aging accelerates whenever flexibility decreases physically, mentally, or emotionally. Rigid thinking creates stress. Emotional resistance creates tension. Chronic fear limits adaptability. Over time, these states influence the body profoundly. But flexibility can be restored. The brain continues forming new neural connections throughout life. Emotional patterns can change. Stress responses can soften. The body can learn safety again. This is why practices centered around breath, awareness, movement, and emotional regulation become so powerful. They teach the nervous system how to return to balance rather than remaining trapped in chronic activation. I think one of the most important realizations people can have is understanding that rest is not laziness. Deep rest is biological repair. During restorative states, the body redirects energy toward healing processes that cannot function efficiently during chronic stress. Hormones rebalance. Cells regenerate, inflammation decreases, memory integrates, the body restores itself intelligently when given the conditions to do so. Yet many people no longer know how to rest completely. Even during quiet moments, the mind remains overstimulated, thoughts race endlessly, emotional tension continues beneath the surface, the nervous system stays partially activated as though danger might appear at any moment. This constant internal vigilance slowly drains vitality from the body. And the body keeps adapting to that state until exhaustion feels normal. But exhaustion was never meant to become a permanent identity. I believe the human body contains far greater regenerative potential than most people realize. Not immortality, not endless youth, but a remarkable capacity for renewal when the internal environment supports life instead of constantly resisting it. The body wants balance, it wants coherence, it wants restoration. Much of its intelligence is already designed toward healing naturally. Our role is learning how to stop interfering with that intelligence continuously. This often begins through simple awareness, becoming conscious of breathing patterns, observing emotional reactions without immediately feeding them, noticing how certain environments affect energy, paying attention to which thoughts create contraction and which create expansion. Small moments of awareness gradually create larger shifts in biology over time. Because transformation rarely happens through force. It happens through alignment. The more aligned the mind, emotions, and body become, the less energy is wasted internally. People often describe this as feeling lighter, clearer, calmer, or more alive. What they are actually experiencing is coherence. Systems within the body begin communicating more harmoniously instead of competing against each other through chronic stress signals. And once coherence becomes familiar, the body begins trusting life differently. Fear loses some of its control. Presence becomes easier to access. Energy increases naturally because less of it is consumed by emotional conflict. Even physical aging can appear differently because the nervous system is no longer constantly reinforcing survival chemistry throughout the organism. This is why some individuals seem to age with grace rather than deterioration. They remain emotionally connected to life. They continue growing internally instead of becoming psychologically rigid. They cultivate meaning, connection, curiosity, and emotional openness consistently enough that the body keeps receiving signals associated with vitality rather than decline. And perhaps that is what activates the deepest regenerative capacities within us. Not chasing youth obsessively, but creating the internal conditions where life can continue expressing itself fully through the body. Because every thought we repeat, every emotion we sustain, every relationship we nurture, every memory we hold on to, and every expectation we embody becomes part of an invisible conversation happening continuously within our biology, shaping how we feel, how we heal, how we age, and ultimately how alive we remain from the inside out.
What makes the idea of an anti aging code so powerful is that it shifts our understanding of aging away from something purely physical and turns it into something deeply connected to consciousness, emotion, and daily experience. Most people grow up believing the body ages only because of time. We are taught that decline is automatic and unavoidable. but modern research is beginning to show that the way we think, feel, and respond to life has a measurable effect on how the body functions over time. This does not mean we can stop aging completely. The body naturally changes, but it does suggest that the quality of those changes may be influenced by the emotional and mental environment we create within ourselves every day. Think about the body like a garden. A garden responds to the conditions surrounding it. If the soil is healthy, the sunlight balanced, and the water consistent, the garden flourishes. But if the environment is filled with stress and imbalance, growth becomes difficult. The human body works in a similar way. Every thought, emotion, and repeated experience becomes part of the environment your cells live in. One of the most important scientific ideas connected to this is stress chemistry. When we experience fear, anger, anxiety, or emotional pressure, the brain releases stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. These chemicals are useful in short bursts. They help us react quickly during danger. But the problem is that many people live in this stress state continuously. The body never fully relaxes. Imagine driving a car while constantly pressing the accelerator pedal. Eventually, the engine begins to wear down. The same thing happens inside the body when the nervous system stays trapped in survival mode for months or years. Sleep becomes weaker, digestion suffers, inflammation increases, energy drops. Over time, this contributes to the feeling of aging faster, both mentally and physically. Now, here is where things become fascinating. The body does not always respond only to external events, it also responds to internal emotional patterns. If someone constantly replays painful memories, worries about the future, or expects negative outcomes, the brain and body react as though those experiences are happening in real time. In simple terms, the body listens to the emotional story the mind repeats most often. This is why emotional awareness matters so much. For example, think about two people stuck in traffic. One becomes angry, tense, and emotionally overwhelmed. The other stays calm, listens to music, and accepts the situation. Same external event, completely different biological response. Over years, those emotional reactions create different effects inside the body. This is where practices like meditation, breathwork, gratitude, and mindfulness become important. They are not just spiritual ideas or relaxation techniques, they are tools that help regulate the nervous system. When someone slows their breathing intentionally, the body receives a signal of safety. Heart rate begins to stabilize, stress hormones decrease, muscles relax, the brain shifts out of emergency mode. In that calmer state, the body can redirect energy toward repair and restoration instead of constant defense. A simple example of this can be seen during sleep. The body repairs itself most efficiently during deep rest. But if someone goes to bed carrying anxiety, mental tension, or emotional overload, the nervous system remains partially activated even while sleeping. The body may rest physically but not fully recover emotionally. Over time, this creates exhaustion. This is why emotional peace is not just psychological comfort, it is biological support. Another important concept connected to this topic is neuroplasticity. This is the brain's ability to change and adapt based on repeated thoughts and experiences. Many people think personality and emotional habits are fixed forever, but the brain is constantly rewiring itself. If someone spends years focusing on fear and negativity, the brain strengthens those pathways like muscles being trained repeatedly. But if they begin practicing calmness, gratitude, optimism, and emotional resilience consistently, new pathways begin forming. At first, this feels unnatural because the brain prefers familiar patterns. But with repetition, the new emotional state becomes easier to access. Think of it like walking through a field. The path you walk most often becomes clearer and easier to follow. Thoughts work the same way. Repeated emotional states become the brain's preferred routes. This means the anti-aging process may begin with changing emotional habits, not just physical routines. One powerful daily practice is emotional coherence. This simply means aligning your thoughts, emotions, and actions together. Many people think positively while feeling emotionally stressed underneath. The body senses this internal conflict. But when thoughts and emotions match, the nervous system becomes more balanced. A practical way to experience this is through gratitude practice. Not forced gratitude, but genuine appreciation. Spend a few minutes each day remembering a moment, person, or experience that makes you feel deeply thankful. As the emotion becomes real, notice how the body changes. Breathing softens, shoulders relax, the mind becomes quieter. This emotional shift creates measurable changes in heart rhythm and stress chemistry. Another practical habit is reducing emotional overload from constant stimulation. Modern life floods the brain with noise, comparison, information, and distraction. The nervous system rarely gets silence. Spending even 10 minutes in stillness, nature, or quiet reflection can help restore mental clarity. Movement is important as well. The body stores emotional tension physically. Walking, stretching, dancing, or mindful exercise helps release stress, energy trapped in the nervous system. Many people notice they think more clearly after movement because emotional tension begins leaving the body. Relationships also play a major role in biological health. Supportive human connection helps regulate stress. Feeling understood and emotionally safe changes the nervous system in positive ways. Loneliness, on the other hand, often increases emotional stress and physical fatigue over time. This reminds us that healing is not only individual. Human beings are deeply connected emotionally and biologically. The deeper meaning behind all of this is simple but profound. The body is always listening. Every emotion carries chemistry. Every thought sends signals. Every repeated state becomes part of the body's internal environment. And once we truly understand that, we stop seeing health as only physical appearance. Real vitality comes from coherence between mind, body, emotion, and daily experience. It comes from learning how to create inner conditions where the body feels safe enough to heal, adapt, and thrive naturally. Because in the end, the greatest anti aging force may not be found in something outside of us, but in the way we learn to live, feel, think, connect, and experience life from within each day.